Hello and welcome back to another Rush Duel Links deck profile. What I thought we'd do today is go over Blaster's Inferno because the deck has got a very powerful new tool, new in terms of the fact it did come out alongside the Go Rush update, and that is Secret Order. This card actually completely changes how this deck works, and now it kind of works as a sort of super aggressive, potentially OTK style deck, thanks to a combination of Dragonic Pressure and Secret Order. So, what better place to start than the skill itself, Blaster's Inferno. So this skill can be used if all of the monsters with 1400 or more attack in your deck are dragon types. I mean, that's basically fine, we wouldn't really want any non-dragons anyway. And the deck contains, at most, one level 5 or higher non-fire attribute monster. So, back in the day, this would be a Dragius, but for us now, we're using the Red Eyes Black Dragon, and we'll get into that in a little bit. Requirement none. Effect: choose one face-up level 6 or higher fire attribute normal monster on your field. Notably, that'll only be our Volcano Attack Dragons, it won't be anything else, and they will gain 600 attack until the end of this turn. So that'll push our guy up to 29, which is not bad. That will attack over a Metarion boss, for example. If it was a level 7 monster, you can add a Dragon's Inferno from your deck or graveyard to your hand twice per duel. So we can use this to search Dragon's Inferno. Dragon's Inferno can pop back row. One thing we can also do is activate Dragon's Inferno, then summon out our boss monster, use the skill, get Dragon's Inferno back from the graveyard, and use it again, and use 2 Dragon Inferno in a single turn. So let's go through the card by card. First up, we have Fortitude Dragon, which is another interesting new card the deck has received. So we can send the top card deck to the graveyard. One face-up monster with 2000 or more attack on your opponent's field loses 400 attack until the end of this turn. Then you can set a Dragon's Fortitude from your graveyard to your spell and trap card zone. So we're not using Dragon's Fortitude because this deck already is quite spell trap heavy, so fitting an extra trap in here, probably not worth it. But this card's pretty good on its own. Its attack and defense stat are pretty good, which is okay into something like Light Galaxy, which can change your guys to attack or just pierce over them. So having a good attack and defense is generally a good idea. And being able to weaken your opponent's monsters can be very relevant. But also very important is we send the top card of our deck to the graveyard, and we do want to get our Volcano Attack Dragon into rotation as soon as possible, because if we have Secret Order, but we don't have any Volcano Attack Dragons, it doesn't really do anything. So milling, still very good. Then we have the Triad Drago. This card is also really, really strong. We only actually have 2 copies of this card because it's a level up reward from Luke. But the only real negative here is its attack stat is only 300. So again, if it gets changed into attack mode with like a meteor charge, we can take a lot of damage. But 1300 defense is fantastic. The requirement: if your opponent has a face-up level 7 or higher monster and you have 2 face-up non-level 3 monsters, so because this card is level 3, we need to have this and then 2 other monsters that aren't level 3, and that does come into our deck building quite a lot. We don't really want to be including lots of other level 3s because it will turn Triad Drago off. The other thing to remember is that your opponent does have to have a level 7 or higher monster, and if they don't, we also just won't get this draw, but we get to draw a card. And drawing a card, again, very, very important. It's very good especially because we're going to need 3 discards for Dragonic Pressure, so having more cards is going to be very valuable. We need to find our Secret Orders. We're going to want to make sure we have Volcano Attack Dragon in rotation, so just getting draws is always really good, but especially in this deck, we need more cards than most. And then, speaking of drawing cards, we then have Treasure Dragon. So if we have 4 or more dragon-type monsters in our graveyard during the main phase that we special summon this card from your hand or graveyard, so that's quite specific, we have to special summon this from hand or graveyard, but the main card we're going to be using to special summon this is going to be Dragonic Pressure, which summons it from the graveyard, but then we just get to draw a card. So if, for example, we're quite unlucky, let's say we have no back row at all, we could activate Dragonic Pressure, send 3 cards, let's say including a Treasure Dragon, to the graveyard, pop everything. We then have 1 card left in our hand, Treasure Dragon comes back, and then we get to draw another card, so we now have 2 cards in our hand, which means now we potentially can make a play using those 2 cards plus Treasure Dragon. Then we have Red Eyes Black Dragon, and this is in here for one reason and one reason only, and that is it is a level 7 normal monster that's a dragon, which means we can bring it back with Secret Order. That is basically it. If we use Secret Order, it will gain 700, going up to 31, which is a relevant number, especially if we wipe the board beforehand. That will be a 3100 direct attack. Then we have the Volcano Attack Dragons. These are basically the heart and soul of the deck. Because they're only 2300 attack, they can't actually get killed by Cyber Assault Dragon's effect, which does come up a fair amount. But again, this is the most important card of the deck because we use it with Secret Order. This is how we turn on our skill to get the extra 600 attack, as well as searching out our Dragon's Inferno. The Volcano Attack Dragon, again, we need this card in rotation. We need at least one of this card in the graveyard as early as possible, so the rest of the deck really functions. Then there is Winged Dragon Guardian of the Fortress #1, and this is in here for 2 reasons. One, it's the 3rd highest level 4 or lower dragon monster, So the top two being the other two cards I'm about to talk about, Dragonite and App Lizard. This is the third highest. This also has a decent defense stat, which, as we talked about before, is really good into things like Light Galaxy. Piercing is a bit more common in general, so having high defense is generally a good idea anyway. Things like Ancient Gate Golem, things like Dragiastar, there are a lot of cards that do gain piercing, so having high defense is always going to be really, really beneficial. So having this card have such high attack and defense is always going to be worth it. Unfortunately, our 1500 attack point monsters have 0 defense, so they are a little bit vulnerable, but it is very much worth it, because if we activate Dragonic Pressure, discard 3 cards, wipe the board. If we activate a Secret Order, and let's say we bring back a Red Eyes Black Dragon, this comes out as a 31. Then if we have 2 15s in a Dragonite and an App Lizard, or any combination of the two, that is 6,100 damage, which will close the game. So having 1,500 and 1,400 attack monsters, very, very important for this deck. Now for the spells, we've already spoken about it quite a bit, but Secret Order is amazing. Special summon a level 7 normal monster from your hand or graveyard face up to your field. This turn, the monster special summon gains 700 attack and cannot be destroyed by your opponent's trap card effects. So very, very strong. We have 4 targets for this in the Red Eyes and the Volcano Attack. And again, if we use this on Volcano Attack, it comes back as a 3,000. Then we use the skill, it goes up to 36. If we use it on Red Eyes, it comes out as a 31. Again, very, very important combo piece for the deck. Unfortunately, if you do Brick, quite often you have to burn Secret Order just to unbrick yourself, which can set you behind. But most of the time, we'll be able to use this to bring back big guys, wipe board, end game. That's kind of the way we want this to go. We only play 2 Dragons Inferno, and that's because this is searchable. We could play 3, but again, we really, really desperately need to find Secret Order and Dragonic Pressure and Volcano Attack Dragon. Once we have all 3 of those cards, then we can kind of start doing our combos and trying to end the game. Without them, it's a little bit tricky, so we did end up cutting 1 copy of Inferno, but Inferno's still really good. Like we said before, we can use it twice in a turn by using the skill, so very, very good. Dragonic Pressure, again, really, really strong. Send 3 Dragon-type monsters from your hand to the graveyard. This is why we want every monster in the deck to be Dragon, ideally. Destroy all monsters on the field, so this is amazing. Gets rid of literally everything. Maximums, fusions, face up, face down, does not matter. We'll just completely wipe the board. And then special summon a level 4 or lower dragon monster from your graveyard and face up defense, which ideally would be Treasure Dragon, which then gets us another draw. And then we try and use all of the cards we've amassed, ideally some face down spell cards, all the rest of the cards on our hand, plus the draw from Treasure Dragon, to really push for a big damage turn, such as using 2 copies of Secret Order is like the best case scenario, bring back just 2 giant guys and just end the game. But if not, we at least want to get in for a big chunk of damage. For example, we could go Secret Order, Volcano Attack, go up to 36. Then we could also summon an App Lizard, and that's 5,100 damage, as well as we've used a Dragon's Inferno that turn, so we've got rid of a back row. If we already had a Dragon's Inferno, that's used it and then recycled it, so we've used 2. It's just a very, very good combo. The only real negative is how often are we going to make sure that we have Secret Order and Dragonic Pressure and Volcano Attack Dragon are in rotation when none of those cards can be searched. And then the traps, Negate Attack, this card is a no-brainer. In some situations, you might want Widespread Ruin, specifically in the Metarion matchup, but Negate Attack is good against every single deck, not just some of them, so really, really important. And then Buffered Slime, again, less useful into Metarion, but really good into literally everything else, so pretty good. And I'd recommend using it unless you can guarantee you're only going to be playing against Metarion. So the extra deck is also quite important because we're playing Luke and because we're using a non-archive skill, using an actual Luke skill. By having 3 monsters in the extra deck, you can fake your opponent out into thinking you might be playing the Dragon Fusion deck, because that deck skill requires you to only have high dragons and dragons in your extra deck, and there is only the 1, which means we could have a maximum of 3 cards in our extra deck. So if we have 3 or less cards in the extra, your opponent might think you're playing a different deck, and that's kind of the best mind game we can do with this deck. We've already kind of gone over the game plan quite a lot. We basically, again, wipe the board with Dragonic Pressure, hit as many back row as we can, use Secret Order to spam out our big guys, slap, 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 get in for as much damage as possible. We basically want to play this like an aggressive deck, because a lot of our cards have, like we said, we have low defense. We've got the Treasure Dragon, we've got the Dragonite, and we've got the App Lizard, all with 0 defense. So we will get absolutely destroyed if we're just stuck going on the defensive. So we want to get as aggressive as possible. If our opponent, though, does summon out some pretty big guys, Dragonic Pressure might be the only way to out them. For example, if our opponent sticks a 4,000 attack monster, we're going to need the Dragonic Pressure realistically. Otherwise, we would have to do Volcano Attack Dragon, summoned off of a Secret Order, and then reduce its attack with Fortitude Dragon, and that's just a crash. So unfortunately, if that does happen, we're going to be in a bit of an awkward spot. But for the most part, this deck can deal with anything. Like we say, the only time this deck ever feels really, really bad is if we either just open a handful of high-level monsters, or if we don't get Dragonic Pressure, Secret Order, and Volcano Attack Dragon into rotation. Once Volcano Attack Dragon hits the graveyard and we just draw into our spell cards, we're pretty much good to go. But if that doesn't happen, the deck can just stall out. But let's find some replays so I can show you what I've been talking about.
Duel! なすぎる